Hello, my name is Louise Newsom, and you're listening to the Trade and Prosper podcast channel, where we share the stories of individuals and businesses that make our communities. We believe in those that are committed to doing well by doing good, using their hands, minds, and hearts to create a better place for us all, and believe that a little sweat and a lot of sharing turns a community into a populace of prosperity. Trade and Prosper is a forum where those like-minded individuals meet to trade ideas, information, goods and services, as well as building long-lasting relationships that enable them to expand their reach locally and also globally. On this episode, you will meet Andre Springer, who was born in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, where he spent most of his life. He began performing in the streets and bars of New York City at the age of 20. Much of it being the creation of his drag alter ego, Shaquanda Kaka Malata. Shaquanda confronts gender lines, racial stereotypes through erratic, spontaneous performances, and he/she exists currently in the form of a delicious hot sauce. Hey Andre, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Well, we are sitting in a gorgeous house in Harlem on 131st Street. You live around here, right?
I do, yeah. I actually live right around the corner.
But your product, I know when I've looked at your hot sauce label that it says Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn. So tell us a little bit about that.
So Bed-Stuy is where I grew up, and incorporating the kind of feeling of the Caribbean, which is where my mom's from Barbados. And so the Bed-Stuy Barbadian thing was part of the flavor, or like the story of the flavor.
When did you first start making the hot sauce, and why?
I started, was that 2014 was the first. I mean, I was making it before that, just like randomly making like chutneys and stuff with my family. Like we always eat pepper sauce with things, or we eat like pickled peppers or pickled spicy like cabbage and carrots. So there's always been this aspect of hot pickled things. And I made my first batch with my little brother for Bushwig, which is this drag queen festival that happens once a year in Brooklyn.
So it was a family, it was a cultural thing.
Yes, correct.
And the hot sauce market, I mean, it's really booming. What I see, and I know I've talked to you about my nephew who loves hot sauce, and every time I go back to England, I take hot sauces. He's had yours and raved about it. So, I mean, do you find that it's a lot of younger people that are into hot sauce?
I think it's a lot of everyone. Like I'm always surprised whenever I do markets, like who, you know, it's like you're trying to find who your customer is. And so like I'm always like finding new customers, and like I'm always pleasantly surprised. And I would say like a lot of like young people are like into it because of how culturally aware I think, you know, the younger ones are, just like with like television, food culture, just like the sort of approach to ethnic food and the incorporation of it like involves like a lot of spice. And so we're seeing a lot of people enjoying and cooking with spice and like appreciating it and starting off earlier rather than later, incorporating it in their diets.
I think you're right. I mean, we think of people like Anthony Bourdain and who's the English guy, the naked chef. What's his name?
I can't remember his name.
Jamie Oliver.
Okay.
Jamie Oliver, right? I mean, the TV culture, like you said, I mean, people are watching just this amazing broad array of culture and food through different cultures. So I think minds have opened, because I know when I was growing up, it was not like that, especially in England. We were still on canned food. So the name of your product is Shaquanda, right?
Yes.
Did I pronounce that correctly?
That is correct, yes.
So who is Shaquanda?
So Shaquanda is a character of mine that I developed over the years when I started doing drag in the clubs and the bars for New York City nightlife. And, you know, when I was thinking of a name for a drag character, I wanted something to reflect where I grew up. And so like I was always, you know, fascinated with that name in general, because it's just such the constant, the way it reads, Shaquanda. When you say it, you just like, it kind of feel like, oh, that's a name. You know, it's like for me, it's like a very name that's distinctive.
And it gives you an image.
Yes. Part of like using this name is also like playing around with that image and also distorting what that image is. So like, there's like all these different pageant kind of drag queens, and my whole thing was sort of a little bit more avant-garde and more about the interaction with the person within the nightclubs.
My next question was going to be, it's how has she defined your brand? I mean, so you've touched on that a little, but away from the clubs, on the street, in restaurants. So how do you think that Shaquanda has defined your brand?
It makes people think about artisanal differently, where like when we think of foods that are like specialty and like well curated, we have like one particular image where it's like usually like either cis male or cis female. And it generally doesn't include like people from the hood like myself. So I want like this like kind of adds that nuanced feeling of like what we decide is artisanal. And like when people have it, they're pleasantly happy and surprised too. But with spicy food, I think it's just really interesting like how that name and how the packaging and how it works with food culture and what our expectations are.
And it's you on that label.
It is, yeah. It's my face.
So without giving away any trade secrets,
sure, yeah.
How's your hot sauce different?
It is like a bouquet of like different flavors. So it's like it hits you first with like this sort of like fruitiness and the robustness from the onions, because I use a lot of onions. Like Barbadians, we love cooking with onions. We love pickled onions, dehydrated onions, fresh onions, caramelized onions. We put so many different types of that process in a lot of things we cook. So like that's like kind of like the base. So you're feeling like flavor and fruitiness, and then it goes into like this sort of citrus, and then it ends like with like this heat. So the heat starts building up, but you're still allowed to taste your food. Right. And that's like a very like big thing with Barbadian hot sauce, is that you're supposed to taste what you're eating, but still enjoy like the kind of seduction of the spice.
It's a pairing.
Yeah.
More than a flavor enhancer. I mean, it's a flavor enhancer,
yeah.
But more of a pairing flavor enhancer versus taking over.
Exactly.
And just being spice. How important is it to you where you source your ingredients?
It is important. It's something that I'm learning more and more, where like the industry for farming is still often clouded. And, when we think about organic and we think about biodynamic, and then we think about conventional things, like, they're all like, that's the kind of produce we get. Conventional meaning not certified organic. It is typical of what we have in grocery stores, and that organic is a label that the government, it's constantly being changed, the laws. Then we have biodynamic, and biodynamic as like, usually smaller farms that practice the most ancient forms of like how they grow their produce. Biodynamic produce is often the hardest thing to find and source because it's also the most expensive. I think it's the way that most produce should be farmed, but that's like we'll get there eventually one day. And then learning about conventional, like within the United States, or just farming within the United States versus outside, because you can get the most amazing organic things from out of the country, but we don't know how those people are treated on the farms. So I do my best to learn about where I get my produce from, which is mostly within the United States.
Do you try to get it even here in New York State?
Yes. When the summer rolls around, that's when I pump up my production. And so like I have like farms that I work with that's mostly like upstate and also Jersey and Pennsylvania. And so like from this area, I can like pull a lot of the produce that I need. And the horseradish comes from New York. So, I always have like some tasty horseradish from here.
Nice. And the recipe, I mean, did it come from a tradition from growing up, or was it something you created yourself from scratch?
So Barbadian hot sauce, no matter whose family makes it or what company makes it, it'll always have onions, mustard, turmeric, vinegar, and peppers, and salt and sugar. Like that's like kind of the base. Then like, some other companies will nuance it with whatever kind of added spices or horseradish, which I love. Like I don't see that many companies. I only know one company that uses horseradish, and then like families add whatever extra little things that sort of makes it their own personal thing. So I started with that kind of base, and then I built my food history around it. I was like, what ingredients are important to me in my New York culinary experience that I can incorporate into a Barbadian flavor? And so like, like apple cider vinegar, like, I grew up loving that stuff. And like, you know, I think a lot of us like love apple cider vinegar. It's not typical of a Barbadian recipe, but I use some apple cider vinegar for that kind of New Yorky appley feeling. And then the horseradish is a rarity that you see in Barbadian recipes, but I use it because I love horseradish. As I was making it and testing it with people and friends and strangers, you know, like getting responses and sort of editing and redoing my recipe until where it is now.
And you're good with it?
Yeah,
where it is now.
yes, I'm happy with it.
So a very important part of the product is the flavor, but it's also about the brand, just to go back a little more to the beginning of our conversation. So you identify yourself as a queer Barbadian New Yorker.
Yeah.
So besides making good hot sauce, what else are you trying to achieve? What message are you trying to convey?
Just the sort of differences, like, and it wasn't like something that I started off like thinking, that wasn't part of my main like objective when I started the hot sauce. I just was doing my market research and seeing who else were my competitors and like, you know, what other companies, like learning about different companies. And I didn't find, like I found a few queer owned companies within the food industry, and I didn't really find any queer Black owned companies. And so I kind of like took this on myself to be like, okay, like I'm here, like we're here. We, you know, like we live in New York and we're in such a diverse area, and like we have all this like amazing cultural exchange, but I didn't see enough of that represented on the shelves. And like I think we will get there one day, but you know, I was just like, oh crap, am I the only one doing this? Like that's from my identity. And then like, how does identity politics play into food culture? You know, it's like a lot of questioning that I ask myself. The most important thing for me is like creating a product that is delicious, that is authentically me. And like, I think all those things combined kind of like makes it aware. Like, it's like, you know, the identity is part of the food.
There's another quote I read as well, that you described yourself as a one queen shop.
Yeah.
Is this still true?
Yes, I have a partner who, my business partner, Dominic Mondavi, and he and I went to school together, and we've always collaborated with making different art projects. And he's also a foodie and loves to eat. And, you know, he and I work together with our display and our packaging and sort of the visual content for our product and our future products. But for the most part, yes, I'm the one in the kitchen, chopping those onions, you know, ordering those things, filling those bottles.
Designing the packaging, right? I mean,
well, Dominic and I designed that together.
Yes. Did you go to art school?
I did. I went to Parsons.
Right, and what did you study there?
I studied fine arts and integrated design curriculum. So kind of like design under the umbrella of sustainability, and product design and fine arts were like my focus. And so kind of it's like funny because like I dropped out. I'm an art school dropout, and I'm still to this day using the kind of education from that small moment, also my life, to create a product that is sustainable. Like I think of like, you know, using glass bottles, not too much plastic, and like when I mail it out, I use paper and cardboard, and you know, so that's like sort of my sustainable aspect. And then the sort of fine art way of thinking about developing a product. So it's like, is it art? Is it commercial? Like, what about it makes it different? Like these sort of questions that, you know, a fine artist would ask when they're making something. And then it's like, how do you let go of that and just create something without being bogged down by all the sort of conceptual things that plagues the artist's mind? Like,
It often puts a big stop on it.
Yeah.
Or delay. You faced some business challenges last year with your kitchen. What happened?
So Pilot Works closed down. I don't know.
Sorry, where were they located?
They were in the Pfizer building in Bed-Stuy. So they were this incubator space, beautiful kitchen with it was 180 companies that rented from them. A lot of like known Brooklyn companies too that were, you know, established and like starting to scale, like, you know, they also offered distribution. And so the company had different incubators outside of New York. A couple, and one in Portland, Maine, then one in Baltimore, and a couple like spread out.
So that was a great community for you there.
Yeah, and like it was so pretty. You know, I'd walk in the kitchen and the light would just, you know, it's really But they overexpanded, I think, or they just didn't spend their money correctly or reinvested correctly. And so they went bankrupt and we lost the space, and it kind of put me in a mental freeze where it kind of made me rethink my strategy of what I was doing.
So where did it take you?
It brought me up here to Harlem. So now I'm in an incubator space where the community is tighter. Like, it's run by some amazing women, and it's like everyone's like taking care of what they do and like really focused on the community of food, and like are helping us kind of develop these relationships with distributors, with bigger companies like Whole Foods and foragers. So, I mean, like, I'm happy to be up in Harlem. And I'm also like a candidate for this program at Columbia. I am in the Harlem Local Vendor Program, but they're prepping me as a candidate for the Business Accelerator Program in the summer.
The whole food culture in Harlem on the broad level is relatively new. I've spent some time here and really feel the sense of community. It seems to be maybe one of the last remaining in the city. Where it's like it's a city, but it feels like a tight community.
Yeah, it is a very tight community.
And everybody knows everybody, right?
It is, it's true. Like, it was kind of like, as a New Yorker from Brooklyn, like moving up here, I was like, yeah, I got this, I'm a New Yorker, it's like moving. And I realized, like, even though we're also similar, it is like harder to squeeze in, but still easy at the same time, because like I connected on that New York kind of tip, but at the same time, I was like, oh yeah, it is different. But it still is like New York. And I'm lucky enough to have friends that are from here that I can kind of like be like, hey, I'm here now.
Yeah. How have your business practices evolved over the past 6 years? I mean, from when you started to today, how have you managed to expand your reach? What do you see as being an important part of your business infrastructure?
That's a hard question, because like I feel like I got caught up in just creating and making. In the last 6 years, it's been kind of like focusing on restaurant outreach and working with chefs. I want like to be in like great restaurants because my product is great and thought out, and to be in the company of a thought out chef in their food program at their restaurant, so that's where like I've sort of redirected my focus.
I mean, is distribution
I would
something?
Yeah. I mean, like when I was at Pilot Works, I got distribution and then they closed. So now I'm working on getting distribution set up for the spring with different distributors. So
how is that? I mean, I am very aware of the distribution side of the spirits industry as a distillery owner, a craft distillery owner, but I'm not familiar with the food side. I mean, is it as arduous? I know it's arduous.
I'm just like anything related, like, you develop this relationship with someone that is hopefully presented to these like stores that you normally wouldn't, have time to go into, or like, if you're one person, like like myself, it's just like, oh, I can't make it to these 50, 60 stores in the next week, but over time it'll get there. So hopefully with the distributors, what they do is they send out, like, here's a new product that we carry now, are you interested? And they'll point me to like, a store, and like my relationship with them is like, yeah, like they take my product, they buy my product and then they sell it to the store, but I also show up to the store and do demos or etc.
You talked about restaurants and selling it to restaurants, and I your bottle sizes. What are the ounces?
Well, they're 5 ounces. They used to be 6.7 in a flask bottle, but then I realized that wasn't efficient for me, like labeling wise, time wise, like the size, the cost of that bottle. I love the aesthetic of it, and it's like that's what a lot of Barbadian hot sauces use, is that kind of bottle. But it just didn't make sense anymore. So I switched over to like a sleek, wider, woozy bottle.
Do you have to adjust for different markets to be able to sell it at a better price? I mean, for the restaurants, let's say a restaurant was buying your product, would they buy those bottles, or do they want it in a larger?
I offer for food service the half-gallon size, which is more cost efficient for a restaurant, and then like they can refill the bottles, or if they can order more wholesale bottles from me. But yeah, I have half gallons. It saves everyone money.
Are you doing this full time?
I am, yeah. I just moved over to doing it full time.
You did?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, how was that? Was that a scary move?
Yeah, it is. It's scary because it's just like, all of the ducks are sort of there, and just, it's all on me. I pay myself, and so like if the company is not generating the correct amount of money to support the company and myself, then I'm out of a job, I would have to fire myself. So I'm trying not to fire myself.
I met you, Andre, at a maker's fair at Vinishafli, actually. Are you doing a lot of those events? I mean, do you find them to be more of a marketing moment, a big selling moment, or are they both?
I think it's both. Like, it really depends, like, on the market and, like, where it is and what makes it valuable for me, like, because I don't know how to drive. I'm going to learn this year.
Oh, good. Yeah. I'll teach you.
Yes, please.
I learned in England. We're very good drivers over there.
So, like, for example, like, when the Venetia fleet goes upstate, I'm kind of screwed because, like, I can't take the train with all my stuff. And, like, those bottles are heavy.
We need to organize a carpool situation, I think, to get you there. Who have been some of your biggest influences? And how have they affected your decision-making with this business?
I never really thought of, like, specifically who. I mean, my grandmother, for sure. Like, food was an important part of her experience as someone who worked professionally in the food industry as a chef. And then, like, moving to the United States, where her last remaining kids, to start over. Just, like, the love of food for her. Then, like, my friend Ginger and Preston, they're a couple, and their, like, love and approach to food is always inspiring. So I look up to them as, like, this funny, strange, loving couple that, like, loves food and, like, creates beautiful things.
And any chefs that you aspire to get in front of, or that you follow?
Well, Marcus Samuelson is definitely one of them. Like, been to Aquavit, like, years ago, and, like, been to the Red Rooster, and I just love, like, his take on food, like, from, like, a Scandinavian perspective, but also from, like, an African perspective. Like, his approaches of flavor and textures I find interesting. And then there's also, like, of the celebrity type, I would say, like, I mean, Marcus Samuelson is a celebrity, but, like, Rachel Ray would be one of them, like, hey, Rachel.
No, I think, is that more her personality?
It is her personality, yeah.
Yeah, which is a lot, which is all, really, when I think of your product, Andre, I think of the personality, because it just reeks personality.
It's spicy.
It's spicy, and it's hot on the bottle, and you're hot dressed up as Shaquanda, and it's amazing. It is. It's very well put together, like the whole story. You kind of look at the bottle and you see it. What's next?
I'm making 2 other hot sauces.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah.
Can you share?
I can share a green one, and a spicier one. The spicier one is definitely going to be smoky. I'm still trying to, like, work out, like, the sort of balance of flavor and heat, but that's kind of hard when it's like, this one's for the pepperheads that really love, they needed that extra level, which is how I kind of find myself. I don't know how to let go, because for me, it's, like, about flavor and heat, but, like, for this, like, really hot one, it's like the heat levels will just take away from the flavor. So it's like, what else can I creatively, like, this is a problem that I'm trying to solve, like, aspects of eating that'll still involve the palate while it's, like, burning.
It sounds really cool. Can't wait to try it. There is one more thing I want to ask you, because as you're talking, I'm remembering, you use social media in a really great way. To promote your product through images and through video and using yourself. I mean, it's like, I know you went to art school, but it's like you went to acting school, that you know how to put something together like that. How do you feel that's helped get your product out there?
It adds, like, another dimension of storytelling. And so, like, the customer can either relate to it or, like, get a more in-depth look, or the layers of, like, who I am as a maker, who I am as a person. So I think it, like, adds a sense of familiarity, which is, like, I feel most people now are starting, they want this authenticity, they want this relationship, they want to know more, they want to see more of a person. And as we move into technology, video is, like, an important part of that. So, like, we use our pictures, and we're, like, on our phones and, like, Instagramming, but also video is, like, another. It's so, like, anyone can make video really now, but it's like, how do you take that, making that video to the next level? So it's like using video, photos, text, and all these different things together is, like, a way to, like, help someone understand the story.
And just one final thought. I just would love your take on collaboration. And have you utilized the concept of collaboration in building your business?
Yes. Yeah, Dominic, my partner, we collaborate. It's always important to go have another mind, that you trust, or even adding another mind that is completely different because you're seeing different sides of like something that you are one-sidedly thinking of. So it constantly evolves your approach on how to make something. So it's like seeing something differently. The best way like I can explain collaboration is like reading something out loud and then sort of reading it backwards in order to see the mistakes that you've made writing it. So it's like collaboration in an interesting way, is like writing the story together, but also reading it out loud and backwards. And it's important to get those different viewpoints.
And what about skill sets?
And that too.
Have you worked with people, traded with people to be able to get other skill sets?
Yes. I have a friend who used to be an operations manager for a big fashion company, and she's like now like embracing her creative side outside of her analytical side. And so she has helped me kind of look at the year versus looking at, the month, and then project instead of just thinking, oh, I'm gonna do this stuff. It's like all the in-betweens where I didn't know how to organize myself like that. And so she kind of came on and helped me, and now I'm helping her figure out her creative ways of like making this storytelling thing that she wants to do. That's our form of microeconomies, is like what skills we have that we can trade. And that's like one of them, where it's like, okay, I can help you develop this creative idea, and then you'll help me figure out my operations. And it's worked out great.
Thank you for joining me today on Trade and Prosper. For more information on our organization and to listen to more podcast episodes, head over to tradeandprosper.com. Also, follow us on social media for the latest news events near you.